we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give, the Democrats are hopeless. They're never voting for anything, not even one vote. But we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country.
And with those words, acting President Trump incited a terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. Now, before I get into this video, I need to make a couple disclaimers. Now, I usually don't claim to be anything more than a layperson on any topic I'm speaking about. The kind of philosophy of this channel has always been from a layperson to lay people. But on this particular subject, while I'm not an expert, I do consider myself something of an experienced commentator. See, most of you who interact with me online or follow my channel know that I'm a veteran. A few of you may have caught my remarks that if there's one thing I know, it's terrorism. And most of you have probably already seen my live stream where I ranted about this attack, where I where I've disclosed that I am a former Intel analyst. And if you haven't seen that, you've seen the stream I did on the following day, or a couple days later, with Julie LaVoice of Wine and Reason, where I helped her go through the attack. Or, what happened during the attack, what it likely means, and, where do we go from here? I'll go ahead and link that video in the description below. So, my disclaimer of experience. I served for 3 years plus training in the United States Army, the United States military, specifically the Army, as an intelligence analyst. And during that time, I spent 1 year deployed in Afghanistan. So I have spent 3 years plus training of my life studying and predicting extremist, insurgent, terrorist attacks. Call them what you will. Now, that being said, I have been out of the Army for at least 5 years. Just over 5. It's like just over 5.5 years at the recording of this video. And I haven't worked in the field since. So I am 5+ years rusty at this point. However, I do have the training to analyze and, attempt to predict terrorist attacks. That's why I usually say if there's one thing I know, it's terrorism. Now, second disclaimer. All of my sources, for this analysis essentially come from the news media. And and clips of the attacks that have been freely posted online. And the most relevant sources that that I felt useful for this analysis will be posted in the description below. But aside from watching the watching the live stream on the news as it happened, and the various articles cited below, and all of them are from, of course, the news media. These are what I'm using for the purpose of my analysis. It's it's been 4 days out. Our information is still likely very incomplete, especially information that can be accessed by the public. So this is nowhere near a perfect or complete analysis. This is, something of a rushed but thorough job by someone who's spent 5 years out of the field. So take this how you will. In the great words of the immortal Peter Falk, there's just one more thing. See, while I have been enjoying a certain amount of invisibility when it comes to internet trolls, there's bound to be some person already typing up in the comments about, oh, I bet he, was dishonorably discharged, or, trying to, attack this analysis by getting at the character of my service. So in order to head that off, I was honorably discharged. My contract literally just ran out, and I didn't re-enlist. I didn't re-up. So, there's that. And with that, we'll go, into the analysis, or what I gather of the events of the attack, and how it definitely could have gotten way worse than the riot that actually happened. During the course of this discussion and analysis, I will be using the terms mob, rioters, and terrorists. I will be using the terms mob and rioters rather interchangeably, but not so much with the word, not so much with the terms insurgents or terrorists or attackers. That's because I am very much of the opinion that the majority, at least 50% of the mob, were not actually, yes, they were complicit in the attack in that they, participated. However, they were not, complicit in the planning or the staging of the attack. It is very much my opinion that the attackers, that the terrorists, the insurgents, essentially used the crowd of rioters, the mob, as a smoke screen, and as cover and concealment for perpetrating their actual attack. Now, luckily for America, and luckily for the people of DC, it seems like their actual attack was foiled from what I can see. and we'll get into that. So, there's the final disclaimer. But we begin, with Trump holding his rally at, just outside the White House, and him and, Eric and Don Jr. and Rudy Giuliani getting the mob fired up, getting them ready. After Trump ends his speech, the mob begins to march to the Capitol building. Meanwhile, in the Capitol building, Congress, there's a joint session of Congress being held to put the final stamps on the electoral votes to, declare Biden as the official president elect, to finally certify the events of the 2020 election. So, as Congress is holding its joint session, they go through the first, couple of the first couple of states in alphabetical order without a hitch. They go through Alabama, they go through Alaska. Then the first objection is raised as they reach Arizona, and Congress, calls a recess, and the House and the Senate retire to their chambers to debate, whether or not the Arizona objection will stand. At this moment, the barriers on the east end and the west end of the Capitol building are being assaulted. And now there is footage that shows that Capitol Police let some of the protesters, some of the terrorists in. But there's also footage that shows, the Capitol Police clashing with the attackers and the mob. So I'm fairly certain that those happened at different ends. I haven't been able to sort out which, where the security response was more enthusiastic and where it was, more laissez-faire. But it, in the west and the north ends of the building is where you have the attackers climbing the scaffolding and climbing the walls with ropes. It's in the east where they clash with DC police and take the stairs. Now, in one of my live streams, the person, I think it was Danger Noodle, who pointed out that this may, that attacking as Arizona was being objected to, and the House and Senate split, was a mistake on the part of the terrorists. But knowing that they attacked from two sides of the Capitol building, the east and the north and west, makes me of the opinion that that this was part of the plan, because you've got the House in their chambers, the Senate in their chambers. So the security detail for the inside of the Capitol building is split into two locations rather than concentrated on the main chamber. So you have a spread thin security presence, which is already diminished due to the actions of Trump. In the beginning of the week, Trump lowered security around federal buildings, basically put all of the responsibility for securing federal buildings on the DC police. Now, the mayor of Washington D.C. is a Democrat, and as the response or lack thereof to the coronavirus, pandemic has shown, Trump very much likes to withhold federal support from elected officials who belong to the Democratic Party, and then blaming the resulting failure on the Democrats, essentially, using the fact that they're not getting the support they need to be effective as an excuse to say, look at the Democrats, the do-nothing Democrats, look at how horrible they are at maintaining law and order, maintaining security, at responding to this pandemic, etc. So, this tells me that Trump was very much complicit, either directly or indirectly, because there's no way he didn't know that something like this would happen, because anyone with a background in security, especially those who look at extremism, at terrorism, at insurgencies, anyone with that background saw this coming. I'm 5 years rusty, and I saw this coming. To be fair, I didn't know it would be, I didn't know specifically it would be in DC on the 6th until I saw, Trump's rally. When I saw Trump's rally announced, or when I learned that Trump would be holding a rally while the votes were, on the same day that the votes were being certified by Congress, I knew that would be when the attack would be. Honestly, my bets were hedged on, or my bets were more for a mass shooter or for a more generalized riot, because that seemed to be what the pattern was in regards to terrorism specifically in America. But I had forgotten about the State House invasion in Michigan, and thus had forgotten that was a tactic that American extremist organizations are beginning to favor, or are at least beginning to test out. And one that they use to great, but thankfully, reduced effect in DC on the 6th. So I've said multiple times before, including in this video, that this would have been much worse. But why wasn't it worse than it already was? Why do we thankfully have the minimum, the small amount of casualties, these minimum amount of casualties? Well, once again, we're going to have to split this into two events. One with the House and one with the Senate. And first, I'll go with the Senate and say, if it weren't for the actions of an American hero, if it weren't for the actions of DC police officer Eugene Goodman, the Senate would have been overrun. Standing alone, Eugene, Officer Goodman, lured the mob away from the open Senate chambers and gave the Senate enough time to lock down and evacuate. So, and in regards to the House of Representatives, the House chambers, the mob had managed to make it to the House chambers, but the doors had been barricaded and the House was, sheltering in place. The mob was attempting to break through the barricade when a plainclothes DC Capitol Police officer shot one of the rioters. And it seems to me that gunshot diffused the energy of the mob, in that some of the members of the mob realized that this was serious business that they were involved in, and they kind of backed off. And once again, the House of Representatives, that bought the House of Representatives enough time to evacuate. So, why would it have been worse if the attackers had managed to direct the mob into the Senate, into the chambers of the House of Representatives before they were properly evacuated? The answer is simple. It's because Congress was the target of this attack. Specifically Mike Pence. Well, okay, Congress and the Vice President. There were chance to execute Mike Pence for betraying Donald Trump. And this was an attempt to stop Congress from validating the results of the 2020 election. And had the mob managed to get into into the chambers of the House of Representatives, into the chambers of the Senate, then they would have had their targets. Then we would have seen a hostage situation. We would have seen executions. Police officers found pipe bombs, found improvised explosives at the headquarters of both the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. They also found a cooler full of Molotov cocktails and a rifle near one of these pipe bombs. The truck of one of the attackers held the makings of napalm and Molotov cocktails in the bed. The attackers brought an arguably ineffective but still there they constructed a gallows. The intent of this attack, in my opinion, the intent of this attack was to execute the Democratic members of Congress and then intimidate the survivors into declaring President Trump as the president-elect. Fortunately for us, both houses of Congress were evacuated in time before the rioters and the terrorists could get to them. And then we see it, as the terrorists realize that their target has eluded them. We see general anarchy in the Capitol building as the mob basically starts looting and doing what mobs do. It essentially devolves into general looting and symbolic but effectively futile gestures, like announcing Trump president from the Senate podium, sitting in the Speaker of the House's desk, and leaving threatening messages and graffiti all throughout the Capitol. Now, while disgraceful and terrible in its own right, I'm personally glad that was as bad as it got, because it could have gone so much worse. And also at this time, there were similar attacks being held in various other states. I can only recall Georgia and Oregon off the top of my head, because one, Oregon is also the focus of national attention because of the Senate runoff that turned the state blue a second time, and Oregon because, Oregon is a favorite target for white supremacists and right-wing extremist insurgent militia groups, because it just is. They like attacking Portland. They like attacking Oregon. But now that this attack is over, hopefully I was able to paint something of a clear picture. But what next? Well, Trump's already announced that, one, on Tuesday, he will be holding a rally at the Alamo. Yes, that Alamo. Unless, of course, Giuliani pulls another 4 seasons. This is obviously, in my opinion, intended to get his base riled up for the next attack, which will, barring other events that will trigger it to happen sooner, be against the inauguration of President-elect Biden. Now, Trump has also announced on Twitter before he was permabanned, his last tweet before he was banned was that he will not be attending the inauguration on the 20th. Which, well, I've seen a lot of, good riddance and comments to the like on Twitter. That's concerning for me. Because that means that Trump's, that the American insurgency that supports Trump won't have to worry as much about collateral damage because, currently Trump is the only political figure that they really care about. So with Trump not in the picture, that means we're going to see an attack with, that will likely be a lot deadlier and a lot less discriminatory in the cases of its target. So we're probably going to see an assassination attempt under the guise of a mass shooting, or an assassination attempt under the guise of a bombing. My bet is on mass shooting, just because of how, like I said, that's how American terrorists tend to operate, from what I've seen. But, so, we, everyone here, everyone watching this video, if you're watching it before the 20th, make sure you're safe, especially if you live in one of the disputed states, because those will also be viable targets. Also, if you happen to live in Oregon, because they like attacking Oregon. But be safe. If you can help it, stay away from state capitals. And just mentally prepare yourself for shit to go down on the 20th. Because it's going to go down on the 20th. Once again, barring an event that will trigger it to happen earlier. Like, for instance, Trump being forcibly removed before the 19th. And with that, I'd like to thank my patrons, Santi the Sane and PJ Smith, because this is a serious topic. And for those of you who like the little in-card songs, I'm not going to do that. Like I said, this is a topic that has to be dealt with seriously, and with a certain amount of somberness, which is why you've seen less snark from me in this video. And with that, keep safe, make sure you're ready mentally, because something is going to go down, whether it's on the 20th, whether it's before. That this attack on the Capitol, this siege, this attempted coup, is only the opening shots of the global war on terror coming home. We have an active insurgency in America now. And we've got to live with that fact. So be safe, be prepared, keep your knife arm free and your shield at full charge. And remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.